I have been working at a small meat processing plant in town for as long as I can remember, and lately it feels like the new owners are up to no good. The smell of death, blood, and guts has been part of my life for over 2 decades now. For the past 23 years, I have worked at Thomas's slaughterhouse, and that foul odor has become as normal to me as breathing. I started right after high school, needing a job to pay the bills. Now, at 41, I cannot really picture myself doing anything else. The job is tough, no doubt about it, but there is something simple about it that I have come to appreciate. Day after day, I stand at my station with a knife in hand and get the job done. Animals come in alive and leave in tidy packages of meat. It is not glamorous, but it is honest work. Thomas's slaughterhouse was not a huge place. We mostly served the locals, processing livestock from the surrounding farms. Old man Thomas had run the show before I even got here, and his boy Adam took the reins about 10 years ago. It was never fancy, but it was steady work, and in our small town, that meant a lot. I still remember the day everything flipped upside down. It was a chilly Tuesday in September, colder than it had any right to be. I had just wrapped up my shift and was heading to my truck when I noticed Adam standing outside, pale as a sheet. "You good, boss?" I asked, fumbling for my keys. Adam jumped like I had scared him. "Oh, hey, Danny. Yeah, I am fine. Just fine." I had known him long enough to see through that. "Come on, Adam. What is bothering you?" He let out a sigh and rubbed his thinning hair. "We got an offer today. Somebody wants to buy the plant." My stomach sank. Who would want to buy us out? Some big corporation. They call themselves Titan Protein Solutions. Adam shook his head. "Never heard of them before, but they are offering way more than this place is worth. My dad is thinking about selling." "What about the workers?" "What about the town?" I asked, trying not to let the worry creep into my voice. Adam just shrugged. "They say they will keep everyone. They want to upgrade the place, bring in more jobs, maybe even help the town out." I wanted to argue, tell him it was a terrible idea, but I could see the defeat in his face. The choice had already been made. 3 weeks later, Thomas's slaughterhouse had a new name, Titan Protein Solutions. At first, nothing major changed. We got new black uniforms with the company logo stitched on the back, and they brought in some modern equipment that was shiny and efficient. But for the most part, the work stayed the same. Then the new rules started coming in. At first, it was small things. We were told we had to wear earplugs on the kill floor at all times. When I asked why, the new floor manager, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Grant, just said it was for our safety. I did not push back. My hearing was already shot from years of loud animals. Next, they made us wear heavy-duty masks, not just dust masks, but full-on respirators that covered half our faces. Ms. Grant said it was because of airborne germs or something like that. It made talking to the other guys on the floor nearly impossible, but we adjusted. The real changes did not start until about 2 months after the takeover. One Monday morning, I showed up for my shift and found that the entire layout of the plant had been completely rearranged. What used to be a simple flow from the holding pens to the kill floor and then on to processing was now split into new sections. Heavy plastic sheets blocked off certain areas, making everything feel secretive. "What is all this?" I asked Mark, one of the younger guys who handled the stun gun. He just shrugged, looking around nervously. "They set up some new processing areas, I guess. Brought in a bunch of new equipment over the weekend. Did you not get the memo about the new procedures?" I had not heard anything, but I would soon find out. They divided us into different teams, each with its own specific role. We were no longer allowed to move between areas unless we had direct permission from Ms. Grant or one of her assistants. My team got assigned to what they called primary processing. It was mostly the same work I had been doing for years, stunning, bleeding, and initial butchery. But something did not feel right. The animals we were processing seemed different, bigger than usual, and their bodies looked oddly proportioned. I mentioned it to Ms. Grant once, but she gave me a look that made my skin crawl. "Are you questioning the quality of our livestock, Daniel?" she asked, her voice cold and sharp. "No, ma'am," I replied quickly, feeling embarrassed. "Just making an observation." She gave a short nod. "Your job is to process, not to observe. Do you understand? I muttered a quiet, "Yes, ma'am," and got back to work. But the feeling of unease stuck with me. As the days passed, I could not shake the sense that something was seriously wrong. Even with my earplugs in, the sounds around me were different. Not the usual noises of cattle or pigs, but something else. Sounds that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. One night, about a month into this new routine, I stayed late to pick up some overtime. Money had been tight, and Titan paid extra for late shifts. I was just finishing up, cleaning my station with the hose, when I heard it. A scream. Human. Full of terror. I froze, the hose slipping out of my hand. That could not be right. We were a slaughterhouse. We only dealt with animals, not... I shook my head, trying to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks after a long shift. But then I heard it again. It was faint, coming from a distance, but there was no mistaking it. It was a human voice, crying out in pain. My heart started pounding as I moved toward the sound. It seemed to be coming from one of the new areas, a section I had never been allowed to enter. The plastic sheeting that separated it from the rest of the plant was thick and cloudy, but I could see figures moving behind it, lit up by the harsh fluorescent lights. I hesitated, my hands shaking as I reached for the edge of the plastic. Every fiber of my being told me to walk away, to forget what I had heard, and just go home. But I could not. I needed to know what was happening. Slowly, I pulled the plastic back and peeked inside. What I saw in that room will haunt me forever. The place was filled with stainless steel tables, each one holding a figure that was both horrifyingly familiar and disgustingly wrong. They looked human, but they were deformed, twisted. Extra limbs grew from their bodies, and their skin was a mix of fur, scales, and other strange patches. They were still alive, squirming in their restraints, their mouths covered to silence their screams. Standing over one of these creatures was Ms. Grant, her face hidden behind a surgical mask. In her hand, she held a sharp blade, ready to cut into the writhing body in front of her. I must have made a noise, maybe a gasp or a cry, I do not remember. But her head whipped around and her eyes locked onto mine. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other, the awful truth hanging between us like a knife waiting to drop. Then she gave me a smile, cold and chilling, one that never touched her eyes. "Well, Daniel," she said, her voice eerily calm, "I was wondering when you would finally show up here. Come on in, we have so much to talk about." My mind was spinning, and I stumbled back in shock. This could not be real. But when I turned to run, two huge men in black uniforms appeared, blocking my way. I had never seen them before, and their eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, making them look even more menacing. Now, Ms. Grant's voice floated over from behind me. "There is no reason to panic. You are one of our most trusted employees, Daniel. It is time you learned the truth about Titan Protein Solutions and the incredible work we are doing here." Before I could even think, the guards grabbed my arms and dragged me back toward that horrific room. It was at that moment that I realized with terrible clarity that my life as I knew it was over. Whatever awful secrets I was about to uncover, I knew deep down that I would never be the same again. The plastic sheet fell back into place behind us, cutting me off from the world I had always known. All that lay ahead was darkness, the unknown, and the dreadful certainty that I was about to become part of something truly monstrous. The guards shoved me into a chair, their strength almost unnatural. Ms. Grant paced around me slowly, her heels clicking loudly on the sterile floor. I tried not to look at the tables around me, at the horrifying figures strapped to them, but their muffled groans cut through my daze. "I am sure you have questions," Ms. Grant said, her voice cold and clinical. "That is normal. What you are seeing here goes against everything you thought you knew." I found my voice, though it was barely more than a whisper. "What are they?" She smiled, that same empty expression. "They are the future of food production, Daniel. Mankind's answer to overpopulation and shrinking resources." My stomach twisted. You're processing people?" "Not people exactly," she corrected, her voice smooth. "Although they started as human, yes, we have made important improvements. Faster growth, better conversion of feed into meat, even specialized organs for luxury markets." I shook my head, refusing to believe the nightmare before me. This is insane. It is evil. You cannot what? She interrupted, her tone sharp. Feed the starving? Solve the global food crisis? What we are doing here is necessary, Daniel. It is visionary. She gestured toward one of the struggling figures. Each one of these can produce 10 times the meat of a cow, using only half the feed. They mature in a matter of months, not years. And best of all, they are renewable. My eyes widened as her meaning sank in. You are not just killing them. You are harvesting them, over and over again. Ms. Grant nodded, almost proud. Exactly. Accelerated healing, enhanced regeneration. We can harvest up to 80% of their body mass and have them back to full size within weeks. It is a breakthrough in bioengineering. I felt sick to my stomach. Why are you telling me this? Why not just get rid of me? She let out a laugh, completely devoid of warmth. Because you are observant, Daniel. You are loyal. You have been with us for over 20 years, and you notice things others did not. We need people like you. I will never be a part of this, I said, my voice filled with disgust. I will go to the police, the news, and tell them what? She cut in sharply. That your local slaughterhouse is raising mutated humans for meat. Who would believe that? Besides, she added, her voice dropping to a dangerous tone, we have resources you cannot even imagine. We know how to ensure cooperation. She nodded to one of the guards who stepped forward holding a syringe filled with a strange, glowing liquid. You have a choice here, Daniel. Join us willingly, and you will be rewarded beyond anything you could dream of. But if you refuse... The guard gripped my arm tightly, holding the needle ready above my skin. Wait, I yelled, my voice cracking. I need time to think about all this. Ms. Grant paused, studying me with those cold, calculating eyes of hers. After a long moment, she nodded. Very well. You have until tomorrow night to decide. But remember, Daniel, there is no turning back now. One way or another, you are part of this. The next day passed by in a fog. I went through the motions of my job, but my head was spinning. Everything I heard, every smell in the air, reminded me of what I had seen the night before. The rest of the crew just carried on like it was any other day. Did they know? Had they been threatened? Paid off? Or were they completely clueless about the nightmare hiding behind those plastic sheets? By the end of my shift, a cold dread settled deep in my gut. I knew I could not be part of this horror, but what was I supposed to do? If even half of what Ms. Grant had said was true, Nexus could crush me, or worse. I was lost in my thoughts when something unusual caught my eye. A new guy I had never seen before was pushing a large covered cart toward one of the restricted areas. What grabbed my attention was not the cart itself, but the strange symbol on his uniform. It was not the Nexus logo. It was something else, a triangle with an eye inside. He must have noticed me staring because he turned, locking eyes with me for a split second. Then, just as quickly, he gave a slight nod and vanished behind the plastic sheets. A spark of hope lit up inside me. Could there be others who knew what was going on? People working to stop this from the inside? That was it. I made my choice right then. I could not run, I could not hide, but maybe, just maybe, I could fight back. When Ms. Grant called me in that evening, I was ready. I forced all the fear and doubt out of my mind and put on my best act. I am in, I told her, trying to sound convinced. You are right. This is the future. I want to be part of it. She watched me closely, her eyes boring into mine. After what felt like forever, she smiled that ice-cold smile of hers. I knew you would come around, Daniel. Welcome to the future. The next few weeks were a blur. They showed me everything, the true scope of Nexus's twisted operation. What I had seen at first was nothing. There were entire floors dedicated to genetic experiments, behavioral conditioning, and processing the product into meat that looked just like any other on the market. I played along, asking the right questions, pretending to be eager, but all the while I was watching, waiting. I kept my eyes peeled for that worker I had seen, for any sign that I was not alone in this. Then it happened. One day I found a note slipped into my locker. The message was short and scribbled in a rush. Loading dock. Midnight. When the time came, I made my way through the dark halls of the facility, my heart thudding in my chest. I had learned enough to disable the security cameras on my route, but that did not stop me from feeling exposed, like eyes were on me from every corner. The loading dock was nearly pitch black, lit only by the dim emergency lights. For a moment, I thought I had made a mistake, that maybe this was a setup. Then out of the shadows, someone stepped forward. It was him, the worker with the strange symbol on his uniform. His face was visible now, and he looked younger than I expected. His eyes, sharp and focused, seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Good. We do not have much time." "Who are you?" I asked, glancing around nervously. "What is going on?" He shot a look over his shoulder, eyes darting. "The name's Adam. I am part of a group trying to expose Nexus and bring down this entire operation. We have been working for years to gather proof, but getting someone on the inside has been nearly impossible." A spark of hope lit up inside me. "I can help. I have seen things, recorded." Adam raised a hand, silencing me. "It is not that easy. Nexus has people everywhere. The government, media, police. We need undeniable evidence and a way to get it out there that they cannot stop or discredit." He quickly placed a small device in my hand. "This is a secure communication. Use it to reach us, but be smart about it. They are always watching." Before I could ask more, Adam stiffened, eyes wide with alarm. "Someone is coming. I need to go. And remember, trust no one." He slipped away into the shadows, leaving me alone with more questions than I could handle. As I hurried back to my station, my mind raced. I had found allies, sure, but I was also in more danger than ever. One wrong move, one small mistake, and I would end up on one of those tables, just another product to be processed. The next few days were a careful dance of keeping up appearances while gathering whatever I could for Adam's group. I smuggled out paperwork, snapped hidden photos, and recorded conversations when no one was looking. But every second I was there, the weight of Nexus's twisted operation bore down on me. It was not just the gene manipulation and the sick harvesting process. I discovered entire sections devoted to psychological experiments, breaking people down and reshaping their minds. I saw kids, or at least what used to be kids, being brainwashed into accepting their new fate as nothing more than living factories for meat production. Each night, I would go back to my tiny apartment, desperate to scrub the filth from my skin, but no amount of soap could erase what I had seen. I held on to the secure calm Adam had given me, waiting for some kind of word, some sign of a plan, but the device stayed quiet, leaving me to wonder if help would ever come. Then exactly 1 week after that meeting with Adam, everything went to hell. I was in the processing area, documenting the latest batch of specimens when the alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed all around, and a computerized voice boomed through the speakers, warning of a security breach. For a split second, hope flared in my chest. Had Adam and his group finally made their move? But when I saw heavily armed security forces flood the building, my heart sank. They were not heading for the restricted zones or the upper-level offices. No, they were heading straight for the main production floor, where the regular workers, clueless about the horrors hidden in the shadows, were doing their everyday jobs. I sprinted toward the chaos, my pulse racing. When I shoved through the double doors, I was met with pure panic. Workers were screaming, scrambling in every direction as security teams rounded them up with cold, brutal precision. And overseeing it all, standing with a terrifying calm amidst the madness, was Ms. Grant. Her eyes locked onto mine the moment I stepped in. "Daniel," she called out, her voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the noise. "So glad you could join us. We are dealing with a little contamination issue." I froze in place, a chill running down my spine. Contamination. I knew exactly what that meant. They were going to wipe out anyone who was not already in their inner circle. The security forces were driving the terrified workers toward the restricted areas, toward those terrible tables. I knew I had to do something, but what could I possibly do against an army of guards? My hand brushed against the comm in my pocket. It was a long shot, maybe even suicide, but right now, it was the only shot I had. As Ms. Grant turned to bark orders at her security team, I discreetly pulled out the device and pressed what I hoped was a distress signal. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to keep my composure. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. "Ms. Grant," I called out, my voice as steady as I could manage. "What is happening? How can I assist?" She glanced at me, her eyes cold. "That remains to be seen, Daniel. It appears we have a spy in our midst. Someone has been feeding information to some troublesome people." My pulse quickened, but I fought to keep my cool. "A spy? That's hard to believe. Who would be foolish enough to try something like that?" "Indeed," she said, her tone sharp. "Who, indeed?" "Rest assured, we will find out soon enough. Until then, we are enacting Protocol Omega, a total reset." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. They were going to wipe everyone out, start fresh, leaving no witnesses. Hundreds of workers I had known for years were about to be turned into the very products they had unknowingly been helping create. I opened my mouth, though I had no idea what to say. Before I could think of anything, a massive explosion shook the entire building. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving us in darkness illuminated only by emergency lights in the red glow of alarms. Chaos erupted. I heard Ms. Grant shouting orders, her usual calm giving way to panic. Security was in disarray, torn between trying to control the workers and responding to the sudden attack. A second explosion, even closer than the first, rocked the ground beneath me. I was thrown off balance, landing hard as my ears rang from the blast. Through the smoke and confusion, I could see figures moving. Not Nexus security, but others, their faces hidden behind gas masks. A firm hand grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet. I looked up and saw Adam, his eyes visible through his mask. "Time to go," he shouted over the noise. "Your distress call worked, but this place is collapsing. We need to get as many people out as possible." We sprinted through smoke-filled hallways, helping dazed workers escape through the emergency exits. People were in shock, stumbling out of the facility into the cool night air. As I breathed in the fresh air, free from the stench of death and chemicals, I felt something unfamiliar: hope. This wasn't the end of the fight, I knew that. Nexus was much bigger than this one facility. Its influence stretched far and wide. But what we had done tonight was the first strike in what would be a long and grueling war. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't alone in the battle. The war against Nexus had begun, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The months following the destruction of the Nexus facility were a blur of nonstop activity. I learned that Adam's group was called the Prometheus Alliance, a network of cells spread across the country. They had been working for years to bring Nexus down, but our breakthrough had accelerated their plans. I found myself right in the thick of it. My years of experience in the industry, along with the insider knowledge I had gathered, made me an invaluable part of the team. We worked tirelessly, chasing leads, collecting evidence, and planning our next moves. It wasn't easy. Nexus had its claws deep in everything. For every facility we managed to expose, 2 more seemed to spring up overnight. We lived in constant danger, dodging assassination attempts, smear campaigns, and worse. There were countless times we barely made it out alive, but we were making headway. Slowly but surely, we chipped away at Nexus's empire. Independent journalists began reporting on our leaks, and public outrage grew. Protests broke out in front of Nexus-owned businesses, and government investigations were launched. A turning point came nearly a year after our escape. We managed to track down Nexus's central hub, a massive underground complex hidden beneath an unassuming office building in downtown Chicago. This was the heart of their operations, where their top executives and lead scientists oversaw the entire sinister operation. The assault on the Nexus complex had been months in the making. We had built alliances in law enforcement, with the media, and even within the government itself. So when we finally struck, we hit hard and fast. The memory of breaching the main laboratory will stay with me forever. It was like walking into a waking nightmare. Rows of tanks, each filled with grotesque human-animal hybrids in various stages of development. Scientists in hazmat suits were scrambling, desperately trying to destroy evidence before we could get to it. And there, in the middle of it all, was Ms. Grant. Calm and collected, she stood amidst the chaos, a slight smile playing on her lips as she watched us come in. "Ah, Daniel," she said, her voice as composed as ever. "I must admit I underestimated you. Well done." Before I could respond, before anyone could react, she pressed a button on a device in her hand. Instantly, alarms blared, and a robotic voice announced the initiation of a self-destruct sequence. "You might have won this round," she continued as the security doors slammed shut around us. "But Nexus is far bigger than this facility, bigger than you could ever understand. We will rise again." The next few minutes were frantic. We worked together to override the self-destruct sequence, just managing to secure the facility in time. Ms. Grant and several other top Nexus executives were arrested, but the victory went beyond that. We saved hundreds of victims, some fully human, others hybrids who still retained enough of their humanity to be rescued. The data we uncovered was damning. It was the irrefutable proof we needed, implicating high-ranking officials, business leaders, and others who had played a role in Nexus's rise. The scandal sent shockwaves around the globe. In the weeks that followed, the empire of Nexus crumbled. Facilities were shut down all over the world, and arrests were made at every level of the organization. The full extent of their atrocities became clear for all to see. But the fight was far from over. The victims needed care, and those who had survived the genetic experiments faced challenges that no one had ever seen before. Worse still, we knew that Nexus loyalists were still out there, working in the shadows to rebuild. It has been 5 years since that night in Chicago. I am no longer the same man who stumbled onto Nexus's secrets all those years ago. The horrors I have witnessed have left their mark, but so has the good we have done. The Prometheus Alliance, once a resistance group, is now a recognized humanitarian organization. We help rehabilitate the victims, push for stricter regulations on genetic research, and stay vigilant against any attempts to revive Nexus or anything like it. As for me, I have found myself in an unexpected role, speaking out, advocating for the victims, and acting as a bridge between them and a world that is still struggling to comprehend the scale of what happened. It is not an easy job, but it matters. Sometimes in my quieter moments, I think back to the early days at the slaughterhouse, before all of this began. I remember how simple life seemed back then, how unaware I was of the nightmare looming just beneath the surface. There are times when I wish I could go back and warn my younger self about everything that was coming. But then I remember all the lives we have saved, the evil we have stopped, and I know I would not change a thing. The world now knows the truth, and we are no longer fighting in the shadows. There are still tough days ahead, still battles to fight. Nexus may be gone, but the temptation to manipulate science, to treat human life as nothing more than a resource, that threat will always be there. But now we are ready, we are watching, and we will never let something like Nexus rise again. As I stand here today, looking out at a room full of survivors, both human and hybrid, preparing to tell their stories to the world, I feel something I had not felt in a long time: pride. We have come so far, overcome so much. And while the scars from what we have faced may never fully fade, we are looking forward now, determined and hopeful for the future. The nightmare that was Nexus is over. A new chapter has begun, and we will be here, standing guard for whatever comes next.